Hi, welcome to another session of Vertex Technopreneur Webinar Series. Today is the number 10th and it's the second last in the series. For those who are new to the series, the Technopreneur Webinar pick topics that we hope could guide aspiring technopreneurs like yourself through your startup journey, from business conception to fundraising to term sheet negotiation, growth issues, and eventually exit. So if you're new to this, you have missed out, unfortunately, but please visit our website. We have highlights of the past webinars that you can enjoy and catch up. Some admin details. This session is recorded, and what that means is that we can do a summary after the session and you can review it to refresh your memory. And if you have technical issue, please log out. It's most likely your device issue, and please log in with a new device. I assure you, we don't have a capacity issue. If you have questions for our speakers, and heaven forbid for me, please hit the Q&A button and we will try to answer as many of your questions as we can. We love your feedback if you have any. It will only help us improve our future webinar sessions. Next slide. Okay, so today's topic is cybersecurity and your startup. So like what we have done before in our previous session, we are sharing best practices and lessons that we learned from our investments, and more importantly, from the founders that we have backed. So for today, we are going to discuss a pragmatic approach to cybersecurity when you're both limited in resources and time. And because of that, you're going to have to prioritize and economize. So what are the first things you need to do first? And as you grow your business, how do you evolve your cybersecurity infrastructure and your policies? So you'll be getting two perspectives today. First, an outside-in view from a cybersecurity practitioner from Israel. We bring you the best. And for the how I did it entrepreneurial view, one who had implemented cybersecurity when he was growing his startup streaming business. So let me introduce the speakers. We are fortunate to have two outstanding founders from our Vertex stable of companies. First, we have Avihai. As I mentioned, he's from Israel. He was hacking, he was coding before he could walk. And he co-founded Cymulate at the ripe old age of 26 to transform how companies determine their cybersecurity posture and then do that automatically and 24/7. He was recognized by Forbes Israel 30 under 30, and he will be providing an outside-in practitioner perspective. And for our how I did it perspective, we have the very unassuming Jingshen, the COO of M17. M17 is the leading live streaming and social entertainment company which has dominated Japan and Taiwan. He's another one with an unusual childhood. He built his first computer game in QBasic while in primary school. He then went on to be part of the team to re-architect the backbone of Amazon's first cloud computing services. Both of them are your typical maladjusted kids, nothing unusual in our business. As for me, I'm the partner of Vertex Growth, the sixth and the newest fund of the Vertex family of funds. Next slide. So this is kind of an obligatory commercial slide for Vertex. This is a sampling of our cybersecurity investments. And as you can see, we cover quite a lot of space. We are in analog and digital cybersecurity. We are in security in the cloud. And we also invested in companies that provide insider and outsider threat protections. And there's one more thing we need to do before I hand you over to Avihai. We are going to do an audience poll. We have a total of 3 questions. So let's take a minute to review the questions and please provide your response. So the first question is, do you employ cybersecurity solutions? The second question is what are the major components of cybersecurity? You can pick one or more or all if you like. And the third question is the scale of malware attack annually. So let's give us a minute and while we collect the answers. Okay, the answers are in. Looks like majority of you have employed cybersecurity solution. There's a proportion that does not, but no fear, you will learn about it on the call, on this webinar today. And looks like we have a very well-informed audience as well, going by the answers to question 2. And let me just flip to question 3. And likewise, I think we have, again, good answers. So let me very quickly give a bit more flavor to the answer to question 2. So question 2 is about what are the components of cybersecurity, and the answer is all of them, meaning data security, data privacy, system security, and cyberspace. And data privacy is primarily about the proper usage, collection, retention, deletion, and storage of personal information. So it's more about the rights of the individual with respect to their personal information. So that's why you have PDPA, GDPR, and HIPAA. And data security is about how you protect those personal data as well as any information or data that are valuable to the company, for example, trade secret or your IP. And it's about policies and processes of how to protect those. So that will include like access control, encryption, and network security. And cybersecurity is encompassing all these components, data privacy, data security, and include system security. Is about, say, how to prevent your handphone from being hijacked, or if it's in a cyberspace, about how to prevent your Facebook from being hijacked. Question 3. Okay, and this is the answer to question 3. So in 2019, as you can see, there are almost 10 billion malware attacks. And that is almost like 27 million a day, or a million, more than a million per hour. So on that pleasant thought, let me hand you over to Avihai, and he will scare the hell out of you. But I'm kidding. I think after listening to his presentation, you will feel better because he will explain how you can protect yourself. So over to you, Avihai.
Thank you, Chuan. Yeah, so I think Chuan introduced me already, so I'll definitely skip that. But as he mentioned, we'll kind of cover, through a couple of slides and talk about, the different levels of security and what, a startup what are the best practices for startups to actually be inside the cybersecurity space and walk through the best practices there. So that is really my nutshell into the agenda of what I'm going to talk about. So having said that, you can click next and go to the next slide. And maybe the first thing, which is, I will say, the most important note and point throughout what I'm going to present and talk about in the next couple of slides is, don't do everything, or of course not anything, but don't do all in-house. Okay, sometimes it kind of makes sense to do stuff in-house. You want to have control, but at the end of the day, as a startup with limited resources and also a very strict agenda in wanting to get to, a startup want to get to his goals. His goals are not always cybersecurity oriented. Not every startup is a cybersecurity startup. And even cybersecurity startups not always will have the resources to manage their own cybersecurity. So don't do everything in-house is one of the best tips I can give, and one of the best practices, because that's where you can leverage the external resources of the experts that are out there through managed services. So having said that, so endpoint and cloud security are very important to these days, because organizations, startups will work with different endpoints. And I will also say that most startups already these days are going to cloud services. So cloud security will be a major factor here. And that's also why we should definitely put them as a major factor, and where you want to also outsource your capabilities. So there are different solutions like, remote work. It can be lots of different, I think even Hock, Chuan, and Vertex have one of them in their portfolio. it actually gives that value proposition of getting like a distributed networking, which is protected. It's also kind of called SASE these days, Secure Access Service Edge, which is a very good value proposition for cloud networks being managed by startups. And also the classic, just, endpoint and cloud security for that. The second one will be MSSPs and MDR services. Okay, that should be one of the first thing you should definitely outsource. And talking about those managed detections services, that's where managed detections and response. That is also a very good point, because not every startup will have the key experts to analyze attacks. Maybe you're being attacked and you don't even know. And let's say you are being attacked and you know about that, but you have no idea how to respond. And that's where you can get the experts. And the reason why managed service makes so much sense here, because as a startup, you're not going to get attacked every week or every day. It's not what's going to happen. And you really don't need the resource to have somebody that's going to be there for you 24/7 if you're going to on-prem, if you're going to get attacked, because it's probably going to sit down doing nothing most of the time. But if you actually get it to a managed service, that's where you can get that 24/7 without sharing that resource of that analyst or that security expert that can detect if you're being attacked. You can respond to it in a very, very low price and a low, I will say, a low overhead. So managing it internally, it's pretty much a pretty big overhead for a startup. And startup, as I mentioned, they're very goal driven. They want to get to their goals. Cybersecurity, not all the time will be their main goal, but it will be a major factor in if you're going to fail in that arena, in that cybersecurity space, which means you're going to get attacked. It might be published. There are so many aspects of bad things that can happen to your startup, from very low level, just my startup is currently, I will say, shut down. I cannot do anything because I've got attacked, into marketing and positioning and messaging that you can get lots of bad stuff if you're going to get attacked. And like when you outsource when you take that into account and you really take it seriously and you outsource that to manage the detection and response, for example, you can rest assured that again, there's no 100% to anything in the world, but you can definitely rest assured that you have the right resources and skill set from that detection and response to give you that value when it actually happens. So first of all, that is, I will say, a very important note here, and I will talk about that as we go as well. But it really is one of the most important points on my slide, is to get those experts to give you those services. And what, like I said, it's a shared service. So you're gonna pay for what you get. You're not gonna pay as like if you're not gonna hold a team internally. That's why we are not going to pay for that skill set, the amount that you should pay. But you're gonna get exactly what your money is good for, which is help me out if something happens. And it's got probably not going to happen that much because I'm just a small startup. I'm not a huge enterprise that is a target, a more highly target for attack. Next slide, please. So cloud security, if you took me 10 years back and we're going to talk about cybersecurity and startups, I probably wouldn't have mentioned cloud security in a dedicated slide, but it's 2020. And when talking to startups these days, I don't know any of the startups that, most of the startups that are online on the webinar, but I can, without that, I can honestly and easily say that 80% here probably using cloud, at least. And that's why this slide is definitely a slide that should be here. And there are many aspects, again, of security that cloud-based solutions, cloud-based startups should implement, sometimes pretty quickly even. And that's because their infrastructure is very cloud-based and their product is cloud-based. And that's on the actual, client side. That's the actual product of the startup. So that's where it also gets important. So, and you can kind of see even throughout different provider. I took the three main providers. There are also more providers out there, but I did want to focus on the three main providers here, which is AWS, Azure, and GCP. And you can see that there are different kind of controls that you can use throughout those providers itself. So Amazon gives you like the web services, CloudTrail, which is important, and you can see like Amazon Detective that's going to give you lots of alerts, and there's Audit Trail and Guard Duty, and even and again Azure is a very important one as well, and you can always also see on Azure different like the Azure ATP that's going to give you lots of different alerts and insights into if somebody is doing something that you should not. It can be from creating a high privilege user that does an action that he shouldn't do, and you're going to get an alert about that. And the reason why I'm also kind of mentioning those features from those cloud providers, because lots of times they're they're very simple to implement, and you can definitely get very specific insights that's going to give you lots of value, and you don't really need, there's not a lot of management there, there's not a lot to do there. It's always a part of the actual cloud pack. So usually it might cost a couple of more throughout your licensing, but at the end of the day, it's going to give you lots of value if you really want to be security oriented. I will say that the right-hand side of the slide is kind of the next step, okay, of having those control on your cloud environment. And we're talking about, posture management for cloud. So there are different controls that's going to monitor and alert when there are posture management issues with your cloud infrastructure. Again, from, if you have created a public bucket, you're going to get an alert about it. And if somebody misconfigured the, Kubernetes, automated Kubernetes there, you're going to get an alert about it from that CSPM. And it really is going to be your helper to manage your, your security posture throughout the cloud from a configuration and misconfiguration base. Those are different. It really is going to be your guideline into how to really find, misconfigurations created. And I will share also my experience. So at the end of the day, when you're working throughout the cloud infrastructure, there are different things that you do that you say, okay, I'm going to open something, or I'm going to open RDP, to the internet just for testing right now. I want to test a couple of things, and I want to validate that those things are working for me as mentioning. And I would say that my best goal will be that I'm going to close that port after I'm done with the testing. But that's exactly where those solutions come into place. If I'm a startup, of 10, 20, 15 developers, and somebody decided to open that port, work on its testing, and forgot to close it, that's going to be the solution that's going to remind you that you have opened a pretty important port to the internet that attackers can leverage to do malicious stuff. So go ahead, and if you don't use it anymore and it's not, well, 99% that it's not a production feature, go ahead and close it. CASB solutions really give lots of different value as well, from data, I will say data protection, and lots of different value that you can get from CASB solution. And also cloud overload protection platforms can also give lots of different value into lots of cloud protection and cloud that is managed in a very large scale. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's go to application security. So every startup at the end of the day will have an app, that's going to manage his everything he does. It's usually an app. It doesn't matter if it's a, doesn't matter what are the clients. Are the clients Android, iPhones, or are they web browsers? Really don't. And the client here is also a factor, but everything at the end will have an app actually, giving the startup, the external face of the startup. So first of all, there are definitely, and everybody uses different open source solutions, because developing apps these days, web apps, mobile, whatever, as I mentioned, there are so many open source that we are using. Nobody can deny that, and it's important. It really is. It really is a part of our new development, world. We use open source. We don't want to develop everything ourselves. There's no reason to. If, for example, if Cymulate is a cybersecurity startup, I want to focus my resources in developing cybersecurity features. I don't want to invest my resources in developing nice charts or some UI frameworks, and that's not my agenda. So I would definitely going to use, and I guess everybody can relate to that as well. So open source is a pretty important one, but it also opens some gaps. So it's important to make sure we use open source in the right manner. We do some composition analysis. We can insert into our CI/CD, as kind of mentioned here before, get into our CI/CD workflow to actually get different vulnerability assessment to those security to those open source tools. It's not only open source, okay? Don't get me wrong. It's also actual code or libraries we're using, even if we're paying for it. It's not open source. There are still updates that needs to be done throughout frameworks and libraries that we use. And getting a solution to your CI/CD that actually shows you when you are uploading your code, that will give you a breakdown of all of the different vulnerabilities that you have in your code, which can be, again, libraries with some issues. It can be libraries with issues. It can be, as mentioned, like unsecured code sections, different kind of things you can have inside your CI/CD that will be very quick and dirty. They will not take a lot of resources from you. It will mainly be giving you the option to validate that when you have a code there and when you're using a new library, or again, if it's open source, if it's not open source, are you using the latest library? Are there any security issues with those libraries you're using? And if so, you're going to get that. And again, let's say you have seen that and you want to update that. It might take you some resources because maybe something now has changed and you're going to need to change your code a little bit. But it's still going to put you in a very important place from, I would say, generally speaking, your security will be better. It's going to be harder to exploit your application. But also it's going to help you out with compliances and different aspects that are important there as well. That's why we also kind of talk about health devices, fintech, compliance is everywhere, and mature companies will look at that your DevSecOps should incorporate that as part of their CI/CD. Next slide, please. And there was a reason why I ended up talking about compliance in my earlier slide. That's kind of my next slide. And again, I don't know every startup that is online right now, but I would say even about Cymulate is also needs to meet a couple of different compliances for different customers that we have. And if you don't, let's say if you're going to be surprised that you meet a specific compliance, it's going to be pretty hard to revert back and change everything from scratch. So the faster you kind of develop everything to meet with those requirements, the easier it will be when you actually get to the point when you need to meet that compliance. Now, I will say that my recommendation is definitely not to go crazy from day one and do everything that compliance says, but I am saying that it's a best practice to think, I will say, 2 or 3 years ahead. And if you're going to go in a direction that you're going to work in different industries or sectors like health or finance, it will be a very good decision to start in a very early stage, not meeting with every point of the compliance, but actually doing I will say, walking through those, that at the end of the day, when you'll have to go back and actually change some stuff to meet with that compliance, it's not going to be a crazy 6 months task. So you can adopt different security frameworks, and once you adopt them, like for example, NIST CSF is going to be a very good example. If once you adapt it, when you'll get to that point when you need to meet the compliance, it's going to be a pretty easy task. Same with FedRAMP. If you need to go with FedRAMP, for example, on cloud services, there will be requirements, and if you follow a specific framework, it's going to be again an easier task to make sure you are compliant with those. So I will say that kind of my summary here will be that if you are in an industry which is regulated, or public sector, and working with a lot of PII, for example, that's where you'll probably have to think pretty early about making sure that your agenda and your workflow is compliance oriented, and when you get to that point, you're not going to be surprised that you need to do all of those tasks to actually meet that compliance, because again, it might be it can be a showstopper from revenue at the end of the day. If you're in that industry, and if you hold that specific data and you're not gonna meet that compliance might sound a little, sometimes might sound a little not startup-y related, but it really depends on your startup and what it does. And if you are there, it's going to be a very good best practice to start it early as possible, just so you really get to that point when you need to meet that compliance. I will say it's a really big difference between being compliance oriented, because once you do that and you're going to meet the compliance, it's going to be a very, very easy task. Next slide, thank you. So some general best practices, I will say for a good for security startups. So for a good security on a startup, sorry. Software up to date. Okay, sometimes it sounds like not such an important thing, or not everybody gives that. I will say that weight that it is an important thing. Okay, when software is not up to date, it's, again, as I mentioned, it's always pretty simple. You need to install a new version, and that's it. It might affect different things that you're going to have to change. Definitely, there will be overhead in installing the latest and up-to-date software. But security-wise, when you have the up-to-date software, at least you are protected from what we like to call 1 days. Okay, if there is a 0 day in a software, there is what you can do, but from the software perspective, there's not much you can do. It means that nobody knows about that bug, but it is what it is. But if you're not going to protect yourself from 1 day, which is again not such a hard task to do, and it is exploitable. We need to understand when there is a buffer overflow in a library that's being written, when there is a vulnerability in a library and a software, it is exploitable. Even though it sometimes looks like just a quick issue on a solution that gives you vulnerabilities, and it looks like there is so much, and you feel like this is maybe not even applicative. It is. Okay, it is applicative when there is an issue like buffer overflow. Maybe it's hard to exploit it. Maybe the exploit requires a pretty good skill set. But I will say the remediation is so simple. Why giving even the option for a good attacker to find the right exploitation for that bug? And it is a very simple remediation process. Just update the software. And when I'm saying easy, I'm maybe exaggerating a little bit. It's not easy. It requires management. It requires resources. As I mentioned, it might affect your code. It might affect things that you're going to have to, work around to make sure you can work with that latest software. But security-wise, the reason it's here on the first note is because it's one of the most important basics, I will say, of cybersecurity. Component segregation. Okay, always segregate your components. Your front, your web apps, your database, your actual backend. And the reason why I want to actually segregate, because if the main idea is very simple. If one of them is going to get owned because, let's say, a specific vulnerability or any other option out there to get to one of them, and if you segregate those in the right way and only open the right ports and the right protocols between those components, it's going to be a lot harder to move between one another. And if somebody owns your application server, it's not going to be that straightforward to get to your database if you're rightly segregated between those. And this is also an important note. Segregating environments, also very important. Not even, I will say, of course, you guys know why it's important from not non-security practice, but from a security practice, it's also important. If you don't segregate it well, what will happen is that you'll probably find misused code in your live environment. That's kind of the main issue. We've seen so many different so many different weird codes going to production in a very large scale companies. It's not even just security startups. You find sometimes you actually see like a huge company with a web app, and you kind of, if you go if you're going to analyze the traffic there a little bit, you'll find they have left a couple of console logs on their app, and you can see that they've insert like logs in their console there, and you can, as an attacker, you can just go ahead and read them and get more details about the app and understand how the backend works more, because they forgot to remove a couple of logs from the app. So, and it happens all the time, and segregating those will be a very good security practice as well. Employee security and awareness. So, you can use definitely WhatsApp. It's it doesn't have to be WhatsApp, of course, but whatever way you guys have to communicate rapidly between each other. So if somebody, you can, I will say, a nice session to make sure employees are aware for security and mainly phishing and stuff like that. If you're using rapid, like instant messaging, whatever you're using, post it there. Just post. If somebody got an email which is a phishing, post it on WhatsApp, show it to everybody, make sure everybody knows that this is something that's being sent to your startup, to your employees. If one employee on your startup got it, everybody else probably will get it as well. So post it on WhatsApp, let everybody see that, make sure they don't click on anything they should. And I will say a periodic pen test or a security validation platform will also be one of the best practices I would offer, because at the end of the day, once you get to that point where you're mature enough and you actually have your internal resources to manage security, even if they are not huge resources, you can already start using different security controls and testing. And just like I will say, just like you have a QA team, your security controls and your security policy needs a QA as well. It needs something to make sure that all of your policies are are being implemented in the right way. All of your security are effective as you expect them to be. Next slide, and I think it's also the last slide for me for today. And I did mention I'm going to talk about that much, but this is really my last slide here to give that final note into how do I see the things in startups. And the reason I've kind of categorized that into three main stages of the startups from a security perspective, of course, and security maturity is, again, what you outsource and what you do in-house. And as you go and as you get bigger, there will be things that you'll stop outsourcing and you'll have them in-house. And there will be bigger things that you're going to still want to maybe outsource. But it is a maturity, like it is like some kind of a maturity graph. The reason why the bars are like that, because there is a graph of maturity that you want to walk through. And the more mature you are, the more in-house you're going to do, the less mature you are, the more outsource you want to do. And not because, and that's a best practice, okay? This is not a bad or good thing. It really is a best practice. So beginners, early stages startups, in-house, I would say endpoint protection. Again, everybody has that already on their endpoints. Perimeter, firewall, VPN, again, very basic, very straightforward. Just have a firewall. Don't let everything from the internet inside your organization, and have a clear policy. It doesn't have to be, a very large enterprise policy, but it means you need to have a policy. What you're allowing, what not, and get that discussion in place, make that policy happen. You might not implement everything on that policy in day one, that's okay, but know where you want to be and where you want to get. And of course, outsource, email, web, and WAF, just outsource them. There are many cloud solutions that can provide you web security, email, or application firewalls. No reason to have them in-house. Once you get to a mature place, segmentation, like I mentioned, inside your actual organization will be a very important. Identity access management solutions, manage that, going to very, very important, because when you have like 10 users that are, inside, no worries, you can definitely handle it. But once you get to 100, it's going to get a lot harder to actually understand who has access to what. And security validation, if you are actually in that point when you're actually going to have different security aspects in your site, you're going to have to validate them, or else you'll just be surprised when you get attacked. If you're going to validate them, this is where you're going to find that somebody has, I will say, an access that it don't need. Somebody, you can discover that your web security is not even really inside the right place. Your perimeter firewall is not doing the right thing it should do to protect you. that's the stage where you should start doing these kind of activities. And you should still outsource, like we mentioned, SASE solution. MDR will still be, from an incident response perspective, will still be a good thing to outsource, even for a mature startup. Because again, there is, the skill set that it's not really it is something I would say important to outsource that specific skill set to to outsource the response to an incident. I will say there are even mature enterprises that uses MDR, not just mature startups. Advanced risk management in-house is going to be the next one, because it is very important to really manage everything. Risk and cybersecurity risk is a large spectrum of points and insights, and at that point where in an advanced startup you need to start managing. Threat hunting and incident management are also something that when you're an advanced one you want to do in-house, because at the end of the day, as I mentioned, outsourcing those incident response is a very good thing, but when you have the skills and you have the right resources to have that, go ahead, use it in-house. And you can still definitely outsource, zero trust networks, as I mentioned, and SASE. I think the last slide is just a thank you note. So thank you. That was my slides, and hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you, Avihai. And you have given very good suggestions on what to do and how to do it. And I hope you have made the audience feel a little bit better. And to make the audience feel even better, then we are going to bring on Jingshen. So Jingshen, over to you.
Hi, thanks, Chuan. Hi, everybody. So self-professed, I'm not a cybersecurity expert, but I have built a startup and I have a technical background. So today I'll walk through roughly what we did. So the title of my presentation, Security When You Have No Time. Next, please. So I'm not going to go through too much introductions, but I go by JS, and right now I'm currently the COO at 17. It's a live streaming platform. My experience is actually founding the company from 0 to 1. The first company I had was called Paktor, which is the largest dating platform in Southeast Asia. And it kind of morphed into a live streaming company where I'm the COO at, and it has about 700 employees over 5 regions right now. So today are the lessons that I wanted to talk about, the choices that we actually made while building up the company because we had no time for security. And hopefully that will be helpful for you guys. Next, please. Yeah. So security, nobody got time for that. So I think the Avihai mentioned it briefly, and I'm glad I got an expert's approval. So the reality of building a startup means you usually do not have enough time. And you're busy iterating on your product to achieve product market fit. You are busy figuring out how to hire a strong team. You are busy fighting with your co-founders. And so who has the time to worry about security, right? When you're worried about survival. Next, please. So the way I see it is that the choice that you have is not whether you can find time for security. I mean, if you ask yourself that, the answer is going to be no. But the real choice you need to make is whether you want to invest in security before or after shit hits the fan, right? So this is the before picture. And then I didn't want to show you the after picture. I personally would recommend that you invest in security before shit hits the fan. Because if you're lucky enough to succeed with your other priorities of building a startup and your service gets traction, you can be sure that you will be targeted and it can potentially be fatal. So today I will share about five things which we did and actual trade-offs that my team and I made when balancing our limited time and security needs while building the company. So the strategy that we pursued is embodied in this quote. So the hours that ordinary people waste, extraordinary people leverage. Not that we're extraordinary, but we leverage a lot. Chances are, unless you're working on a cybersecurity startup, there are others who do security better and faster than yourself. So use them, right? So next, I'll describe the 5 levers that we use when building our company. So lever number 1, please use the cloud for infrastructure. So I hope this is a given for most of you here, but for those who are still considering, please stop considering, just use the cloud. Not because it's cheaper to start, right? Or that you can get free credits, but because physical servers are a security headache, because you need to worry about physical security. You need to have a lock, you need to have a room, and you need to prevent somebody from just bringing your computer home, right? You don't want to worry about that. Next is that, the next point. So cloud providers have basic DDoS protection. So essentially attackers, when your service is in the cloud, attackers are essentially attacking Amazon and Google servers. They're not attacking your servers. So they have some basic protections which shave off a lot of the attackers, right? And the third reason is it's much easier to set up firewalls or VPCs for your company servers once you're in the cloud. Next lever. All right. Use social media like Facebook or Twitter or YouTube or Snapchat to provide authentication instead of rolling out your own authentication system, right? 3 reasons, right? They have comprehensive guards against creation of fraud and spam accounts by default, because it's their own requirement, right? They don't want so many spam accounts on their own Facebook, on their own platform. Second, their API design, their authentication API design is usually much more secure and has the tokenization or encryption that is industry standard, right? And this prevents a lot of man-in-the-middle attacks. And lastly, it's much harder for bots to create hundreds of Facebook accounts than it is to create accounts in your app, right? Because they have solved all these problems before. And trust us, we've tried. We've tried to create hundreds of accounts for testing reasons. It's just very difficult, right? The next lever, just pay Apple and Google 30%, right, to use their payment solutions. You can make noise or revolt after you've reached like Fortnite's scale, but at the start, just pay the landowners, right? Because writing code and building processes to deal with credit card chargebacks and other kind of edge cases for payment processing is a massive pain. You don't want to do that, right? And outside of Apple and Google, in many third-party vendors, credit card fraud is quite rampant actually. And this is not something you want to deal with, right? This is something that Apple and Google do a good job of shielding you from, right? That said, there's a caveat. Because payment goes through them, the refunds are not really under your control. So watch out for refund fraud. This is a case where people make a purchase, get some item in your app, use it, and then request for a refund, right? Then you might lose some money. So this is something you kind of need to watch out for. That's a caveat. All right, next lever, free security reviews. So both AWS and Google provide free in-person security reviews if you have a good relationship with the account manager. So they will get security experts to review your systems in depth and give you a set of recommendations. And some of these recommendations will come with using more of their services, right? For sure, right? But you don't have to use their services, but I've always found these reviews to be very comprehensive, very broad, and very instructive. They'll literally give you a security roadmap. So fix this problem, fix this problem, fix this problem, fix this problem. So that's an artifact that will come off the review, and it's usually free. Next lever. So use third-party access controls. What this means is if you use third-party systems, let's say you use Facebook to run your ads, or you have accounts in Google Play Store or iTunes Connect, they all have an ability for you to set roles for each individual account. All right, please use them. Restrict everyone as much as possible without affecting their ability to work. So the basic principle here is to give them access to only what they need to know and not anymore. For instance, the developer might not need to know financial information or tax information. And then your finance or accounting person does not need to be able to change your app store listing, right? So limit the permissions as much as possible. Definitely do not give admin access to everyone, because everybody does that. I know everybody does that. Because it's the easiest thing to do, but you will regret it for sure. So bonus tip related to the last one about admin access. Do not use shared email accounts. Many people do this. They have admin@yourcompany.com, right? And I know why most people do this. They do this because you want to save money, because every provider charges a different rate. You pay a certain amount for each account, right? But it's not worth it, because when you are sharing an account, chances are the password is going to be very easy to remember. If not, it will be hard to share. And in your office, I assure you, there will be post-its with your admin password somewhere. That's for sure, right? And this has massive leak potential. And the worst part is, if it leaks, you have no idea where it came from, right? So please do not use shared email accounts if you can. If you do have to, you can use a password manager like OnePass or LastPass, and those can help you manage your shared accounts. So that's all the tips that I have for you guys today. Hope this is helpful for your startup journey.
Hey, thank you, Jingshen. I think that's very good. I think those are very helpful lessons. I think learned from the trenches, and I'm sure our audience would appreciate it. I think they're really practical, and I think there's something that can be adopted that will save you a lot of headaches and even heartaches. So we have come to the end of the formal presentation. So we're now in the Q&A. We have a few questions from the audience. I'm just going to pick the first one. And the first one is very topical, is about COVID. So we are still in COVID. And the question, and I think this applies to both Jingshen and Avihai, how has COVID changed the way we think about cybersecurity? And maybe I can also broaden that to say, okay, because of COVID, what additional things are we doing? And if we project it a bit further, what other things that should we be doing, maybe going forward on the longer term basis to make our cybersecurity, our network more robust? So this question, I think, applies to both of you. And so maybe Avihai, you can start first, and then Jingshen can continue from there.
Oh yeah, and I think COVID is something everybody talks about, so it's definitely a question to be asked in a webinar. For me, I will say there are two main points. Okay, one, and I'm not sure how startup related are that, because working from home, I would say, was something that startups always do. And again, like we said, startups always these days, it's 2020, and we all went cloud, and we worked from home, we did everything, but it's definitely a pretty huge for the market. Okay, so the market did go big to work from home, and it did go big to get lots of solutions for remote access and cloud-based solutions for working from home that can provide that. So I will say it really is like on the cybersecurity in general, that was like the main effect. All of those, I think we'll kind of mentioned it in both our slides, me and Jingshen as well. Cloud went went crazy there. So everything went cloud because everybody is from home. So you want to still centralize in some way, and you went to the cloud. But it also opened lots of different remote access security issues. But those were my main 2 points that I've seen with the effect of COVID on cybersecurity, except the main effect that for some reason attackers leveraged it, a good reason they've leveraged the COVID-19 pandemic to run their own attack pandemic as well, because there was a pretty big growth in attacks during the COVID-19.
And so I'll echo what Avihai said. I think the biggest impact is actually about remote work. And essentially that just brought everybody online. And as far as I'm concerned, I think online by default actually has better security. Although it does open up new holes, but it forces you to have better security because you need your own accounts to log into Zoom. You need your own accounts to log into whatever communication tool you have. And there are a lot less post-its because no more use. So I think for us, it's a plus. On the downside, we do see more phishing attempts using COVID. Yeah, but I think that's independent of COVID. Anytime there's something new, they're really smart. They should become marketers, the fishes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to kind of combine the next two questions and trying to relate back to both of your presentation. And then cloud was a big thing, both in your presentation, both as a way to quickly get up to speed on cybersecurity. And Avihai, you have listed the functionality and the capabilities of the three big cloud providers that also provide cybersecurity. The question we have from the audience is how do you pick which is the right cybersecurity provider for our audience? So what are the main things that you should look out for? And that's question one. And then broadening it a bit, so it's using your chart, Avihai, when you go from beginner to mature and advanced. So at some point you're bringing in-house some of the cybersecurity functionalities, and that's where you probably also have to seriously hire cybersecurity personnel into the organization. So the question, and I think this also applies to Jingshen. So if I'm hiring my first cybersecurity personnel, so what are the qualities I should be looking out for? So recap, first question, how do you pick cybersecurity service provider, either the cloud or MSSP? And then the second question is what quality and characteristic you should be looking for cybersecurity personnel?
Sure. So first of all, I will say from the cloud provider perspective, it's definitely about features, okay? At the end of the day, you're leveraging, cloud has lots of different services it provides. So first of all, it depends which services you're actually using on the cloud. And once you map that, you can really check out the relevant security feature that provider gives to those specific services, okay? The entire cloud, I think, you should not look at the entire cloud like as one feature, one kind of thing. There might be different security feature for different services that you're using on the cloud. And once you kind of map out this, you might even see that one provider doesn't even provide a security feature for that specific service. So first of all, map out your services on the cloud and then check out the different security services it provides to each one of them. Afterwards, it's going to be a little bit how you read those, and do you feel and can you manage that in the right way? And then it will be more of like, can I relate more to this provider security, to that service security, or to that security? So it really that should be kind of the flow of decision. From an MSSP perspective, I think it's about finding the right MSSP that has the right skill set and the right, I will say, experience. Okay, I would go for the most experienced one here, because the more you see, the more attacks you handle, the more experience you have with it, probably the better you go with that. So there is no, I probably can find some methodologies that MSSPs are using to provide the best services, and you can definitely question them. But I don't think I can give you like a Boolean 0 or 1 parameter for the best, to get the best service provider. But I think if you see a service provider that has came from backgrounds of being analysts and pen testing and had his fair share of responding to incidents, you can you'll probably have a good, I will say, a good experience with that as well. Answering the second question, like I think, if you kind of go back to my slide there, it did not have specific parameters of, what is a beginner, what is a mature, what is an advanced. And so your question is definitely on the spot, but I'm not going to give you like a Boolean answer, yes or no, you need to do X, Y, and Z and then hire your first personnel. But I think it's a point where you feel that there are tasks that you want to get from, a security oriented task that you want to get out, and that outsourcing it is just, I will say, not good enough from time perspective, okay? Because time will be a key factor here as well. As like I mentioned earlier, the idea with going managed service is that you don't need, all of those personnel. You don't need 5 different skill set in your company, because you'll probably use 5%, of those skill set each time. So outsource that, you'll have like your 100% and 5% from each different skill set that you're going to get from a managed service. But if you find that you need a specific skill set for a 100% task, 100% employee task, even 90 or 80 will be, I think, good enough to start recruiting somebody. But that's the idea. Like when you're a beginner, there are different skill sets for cybersecurity. So you probably need 5 to 10% of each skill set, and you don't want to hire 10 different employees. So you go and you outsource it. But when you do get to the point when you see that a specific skill set, you need more from it, like 80% of it, go ahead and get a personnel, get somebody on board.
Okay. And Jingshen, would you like to add to that from your M17 experience? Yeah.
Yes, for us, I think for any of the 3 large cloud providers have a lot of tools. So the problem that we see is usually we are just not using the tools. So I think any of these services of the cloud services are fine as long as your engineers are willing and forced, I guess, to use those tools, right, to secure the gates. In terms of how I pick cybersecurity providers, I just look for the ones that are run by hackers or ex-hackers. I think that's where I get the most comfort from.
Okay. And in terms of hiring cybersecurity personnel, what has been your policy and your decision matrix?
We try to outsource as much as possible, but I think we're at the stage where we are looking at some cybersecurity personnel, but we kind of don't look for specialists. We just look for engineers or senior engineers with some experience in that field. Okay, thank you. The next question is from Lester. I like the question because I think I know the answer, but let me read out the question first. The question is, how important is cybersecurity in markets where IT skills are not overly sophisticated? Is the level of risk similar in your opinion? Example, in frontier markets?
Yeah, I think well, you know the answers. Of course, it's important. It should be even more important. Okay, and I will share my experience as Cymulate. Maybe I'm biased because I'm one of the co-founders in Cymulate, but one of the main agendas we brought with the product that we've built is to give IT skill set that are not overly sophisticated the ability to run cybersecurity operations, which usually that requires a lot more skill set. So yeah, definitely I think those places, those, I will say, a little bit emerging markets and the IT skill set are I will say IT security at the end of the day, at least not that sophisticated. They are even more vulnerable to those kind of things.
Yeah, I second that. I mean, these hackers are global, right? And they just go where the doors are the lowest and where you're most vulnerable. And as long as there's money there, they'll go. It doesn't matter what the ICT skills are of the local market.
Yeah, and I have similar experience too. I find that frontier markets are the markets where the cyber hygiene is the lowest. I mean, one of the most common experience in the frontier market is that you use pirated software. And when you use a pirated software, you don't. And to Avihai's point, when you use a pirated software, you can't update your software. And then you have a big vulnerabilities because your software is not updated. You have holes everywhere and you open up yourselves for attacks. So I agree with Jingshen and Avihai's point that I think it is a lot more scary in those environments. Okay, I have one conscious of the time, and I have one burning question actually that's coming from me. So if you're in a startup, and when you have a breach or you have a data leakage, what is the right action? What's the right course of action? I have an investor view, and I like maybe Avihai from external view. What can you do? What should you do? And then from Jingshen, from person running a startup that's having a breach, what is the right thing to do?
I'll try to answer quickly because of time, but it depends on the breach. Okay, first of all, you need to identify what was a breach. Okay, a breach is it's an abstract concept. Your web app could have been breached, your environment could have been breached, one server could have been breached. So first of all, you need to really understand what was breached, remediate that. I will say usually a lot of times it's as easy as changing a password, and that's it. You have remediated from that breach, and then you're going to have to walk through all of those. If data was leaked, so you need to understand which kind of data was leaked, and lots of time disclose it if data was leaked. There is no other option but disclosing the data, because I will say marketing wise, if the attack will be disclosing it before you, it's going to be a lot worse. So definitely disclose it. But yeah, first thing is you need to find what was breached. And usually, as I think I mentioned earlier, in our space as startups, if we're going to get breached, it's going to be because somebody sprayed something. Okay, it's not a targeted attack. We're not the national government of Colombia. Okay, we are startups. If we got hacked, it means that we did something very stupid. Okay. And usually it's going to be a very stupid thing to remediate. Again, you're going to have to change a password, update one software maybe that has like a vulnerability which is not updated, and then start a remediation process to really understand the data that was leaked and having all of those management decisions that you're going to have to take afterwards.
From my perspective, I'll actually, this is quite a cross-function response. I think I'll get the PR and marketing team ready with the press release, right? Next, the customer communication, you need to be ready to disclose to customers that they've been leaked, get the email list ready. And then on the engineer side, they need to investigate where the leak happened. Of course, patch up, but I think more importantly is to see the scope of the leak, how big it is, what actual information was sent out, and then be upfront about communicating, because it's going to come out sooner or later.
Yeah. So there you have it from the business side and from the technical side, and then maybe I can just overlay that with from an investor. If one of my startup where I've invested got hacked, and from an investor perspective, I would like to know. And I think the message there is, I think the trust between the company and your investor is very important. If something as critical as this has happened, you need to let your investors know. And the other benefit of that is then you will have their counsel as well. And you have more heads being applied to solving this problem, to damage control. So I think the common theme is that disclose to your users, disclose to your business partners, and also disclose to your investors. Okay, so with that, I'd like to bring this webinar to a close. I'd like to thank our speakers, Avihai and Jingshen, and also you, the audience, for making time for this, and of course, all your good questions. So thank you very much. And last thing, I'd like to highlight that the next webinar, and it's our very last one, is 1 week from today, and at 1 p.m. And I'm told to emphasize it will be at 1 p.m. So it's at a different time. It's at 1 p.m. The date is 6 November, and it's a very important topic, and the topic is about exit. So please tune in for the last webinar. Thank you very much.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.